James, Lindsay, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So I wanted to talk to you about this observation online that I've been seeing, which is actually coming a lot from the right now. That this, there's a term, right? Woke right. I don't know if you coined that or somebody else did, but it's interesting because there's a lot of affection for, the enemies of the United States and a lot of love for what's basically, I would just say it's pretty much an embrace of communist thinking and communist ideas now. Even loving actual communist countries like China, Cuba, Venezuela, or the dictatorships. Can you sort of give us your understanding of why this is happening on the right side, who is supposed to be anti-communist or whatnot along those lines?
Okay, so this is a super complicated topic, and I don't really want to be careful, but I think we should be careful which makes it more complicated because we don't know for sure, right? And the kind of accusations when you start talking about people apparently working on behalf of foreign powers that are hostile to the country, particularly during a time of military conflict, you start getting into some hairy territory. But I will say first that the term woke right has been popularized by me, but I didn't coin the term. The term predates me. I think I used it like kind of casually here or there for a small amount of time. But the term started happening on social media in 2022. I didn't start using it regularly until late 2024. So it had been floating around and I just picked it up and ran with it. And then I put kind of legs under the concept to make it make sense why that term applies beyond like kind of superficial comparisons. But I digress. So why is this happening? I mean, my hypothesis for why this is happening is that the resistance to the kind of global communist, leftist, whatever we've been facing for the past roughly, at least in an acute sense, the last 10 years, whether that's BLM, whether that's COVID, whether it's Trump derangement, all of these kind of, whether it's what we call it globalist, whether we look at, the influence of the BRICS nations, including China and Russia, it's clear that there's been an intention to have what is actually referred to as a meta systems change. We're going to reorganize the world order. We're going to think about how we organize global politics completely differently. And this has been happening, whether, United Nations, CCP, World Economic Forum, Soros's Open Society Foundation, we all know are kind of part of this. We now understand after the Doge expose that USAID is a major part of this attempted transformation of Western nations in the United States from within as well. And it was failing. Okay, so that's the key point, that we, the citizens, mounted a resistance. We got our heads around what was happening well enough to derail a lot of the program. And so as I phrase it a lot of times, we can make Trump kind of a focus of this issue, that they were unable to take Trump out from the outside, so they have to try to take Trump out from the inside. So elements within the MAGA movement, whether they were always kind of sleeper cells, whether they became bought off. I know there was a massive attempt in 2022 in particular to start growing an army of people that think along the lines that we call woke right now, and to get podcasters and build brands and to just kind of build out channels and platforms and networks by which they could monetize and make a lot of money. I know that happened in 22, but whether this is longer going back into the early 2010s or not is irrelevant. The point is that the global agenda will continue. If the American conservative movement is its primary obstacle, that thing will be destroyed from within. So why is it happening? Is it has to destroy that. The American conservative movement and its actual resistance. So you can do that by poisoning the well. You can make it be associated with horrible things like racism and anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, outright Nazism in some cases, open fascism, calling for things like a Protestant or American Franco or a Protestant or American Hitler, as has been done by relatively prominent individuals. Open celebration of the Nazis, the SS, not just kind of this Hitler apologetics or this kind of Nazi history revisionism we see from characters like Daryl Cooper, for example, on the Tucker Carlson podcast. Not just that, but outright, celebration of the Nazis. All of this poisons the movement from within. It also causes infighting within the movement because a lot of people won't tolerate it and won't go along with it. And so we have a fractured infighting movement that can't attract new people and is scaring people off. So that's part of the program. Part of the program also is to use Israel and the relationship the United States has with Israel as a wedge, both to damage the movement, to make it a wedge issue that splits the party's cohesion, but also to split that relationship, to undermine the faith of the United States partnering in an alliance with Israel going forward. And there are strong reasons to believe that as global circumstances and powers shift right now, a U.S.-Israel alliance is not merely a kind of bulwark against the Islamic wing of the Islamo-communist or red-green axis united front against the West, but it's also a crucial piece for creating the stable 21st century world of peace that we could possibly envision. It's like the next round of the Pax Americana requires this alliance, maybe even including India as well as kind of a bulwark against Russian and Chinese or CCP intrusion. So there's a lot of things that they are doing all at once because right now is the moment. Right now is the only time they have because we had effectively mounted a resistance against the global left. The global left is not able to make the advances the way that it could before. And so the movement that had exposed them and foiled their chances has to be stopped, has to be taken apart. So the short answer then is the purpose of this is to hand power back to the Democrats and break the US's alliance. They say America first is actually America only, but that really it would translate to America isolated. And so that I would say is the operational goal is isolate America on the world stage, target it relentlessly, kind of the Alinsky tactic of freeze and isolate a target and then go after it until it breaks. And the goal is to make America a nation that can't do anything because it's constantly fighting with itself internally, that has no allies externally. Just today, we see that the EU has announced that the actual EU has come out and announced that they want to stand with the people of Cuba, which means they have, for all intents and purposes, declared themselves aligned with the communist axis.
What I find very interesting, you mentioned that this essentially you're discrediting the America First or MAGA, whatever the term they use, is from within, from the outside, right? Because obviously you're not going to convince anyone from the other side of the aisle to come over, and now you're trying to destroy that whole thing from within. So something similar that, because my channel covers a lot on China, right? Something similar that China does is send out these influencers who are supposedly anti-government, anti-communist party, but when at the key moment they will turn. So is this something that was in the works, say, a decade ago to plan something like this, sort of like a sleeper cell program? Or was this like you mentioned, the next strategy in the playbook just because I guess you would say the turn of a global left movement has stopped? What do you think was that a sudden thing that they switched to, or was it a long-term thing that was in play?
Honestly, I think that this has been a long-term play, at least in some regards. I don't know how directly the CCP was involved in the long term, though. My guess, although the CCP is very strategic, right? So we shouldn't undercut their capacity for long-term strategy and planning like this. And I do have reasons to believe that all the way back before the 2010s, that the CCP had ambitions to make sure that if this kind of global left move was resisted effectively, to spoil the program with a radical right wing that nobody likes. So the CCP probably was involved, but I think that certainly by the middle 2010s, 2012 through 2014, we have probably undeniable Russian involvement in right-wing movements across the West, specifically in conservative movements. Also, I distinguish between right-wing and conservative now, thanks to this whole mess. But there's been definite Russian involvement, which is usually geared toward this kind of separatism, this massive anti-war push, no more war, no war at all, because obviously there's going to be eventual conflict in the Middle East, especially around Iran. And if Trump was going to be president, Trump's on the record back to 1980 saying that he wanted to do in Iran what he's doing in Iran now. So they must have known it was likely coming, that he would take this opportunity if it showed itself. So all that aside, I think that this runs back to the middle 2010s at the latest, but the CCP probably had at least a vague strategy. I don't know how specific it was, a vague strategy to intervene in this way. So
Yeah, well, no, I think I didn't really make it clear. What I meant was, like the CCP had a similar strategy. I wasn't directly saying that, they were involved in this, but, you just mentioned it because Code Pink is a pretty good example, right?
Yeah.
That the founders are in bed with the CCP. So, but they're more on like, the far left side of things. But I just wanted to ask this because what I've noticed was, you had established voice in the conservative movements. I won't name names, but everybody knows who they are. They seemingly have all gone down this path of whatever is opposite of America is good, right? So whether that's embracing Sharia law, whether that's saying that the Russian grocery markets are cheaper, or whether it's these examples, which I found is I don't know how many people, I don't have the data on this, but I don't know how many people are genuinely convinced by that. But I do know that some people still think, hey, maybe the other side is not so bad. how do you, what exactly is the theory behind the relative say, hey, the other side's not so bad, right? Like with China, it will be something like, look, we got cheap food, we got fast trains, we got beautiful LEDs on our
LEDs on
buildings.
our buildings.
Yeah, but with say Russia, it could be something like, they don't have gays or homosexuals in there. So
Mhm.
it's almost like relatively there's something better than America in these areas. Like, what is that, concept or relationship in that?
I mean, I think that's the demoralization campaign
Mm.
against America, right? So America has failing cities, everything, which isn't true. I mean, there are problems in a lot of American cities, but they're not exactly like, except maybe San Francisco or parts of it, they're not exactly like garbage dumps, right? There are some serious issues in our most strongly Democrat controlled cities in Democrat controlled states for sure. But the idea is like with the Chinese strategy, there is like, look how beautiful our cities are. The Russian strategy is look how safe our subway is, and look at this gorgeous subway station. And then the idea is to just let these podcasters feed a critical America theory, as I call it, a critical America theory, into the American public to make them feel down and demoralized. Our country's not succeeding. We're not growing. We're not, everything's kind of going bad. And then to portray at the same time this image of, super advanced technology in China. You have these great, look at these cityscapes with LED buildings. It's a light show. It's amazing, the technology. And you see these right wing podcasters, as a matter of fact, not just doing the demoralization side, but actually sharing. Oh, I've never felt safer than when I go to China. Look at this incredible, cityscape from Shanghai. And so they're doing the other side of it too. They're showing the glory of China against the awfulness of America. And then the Russian, it's like we've got Christianity. We don't, like you said, allow homosexuality. We've got traditional women, and all of this kind of stuff. They, of course, aren't showing the totality of Russian life, but they can create this image that they even made that the Russian government even made that like weird propaganda ad a few years ago about how great everything is in Russia. They have all this natural gas, they have great forests, they have beautiful women, they have Christianity. It's like, and then they're juxtaposing that against this idea of a failing, falling West. So the idea is to get people to feel very negatively about their own countries and to feel very positively. Actually, it's to feel that there's an inevitable shift of power, because this is the whole story, and this is why I wanted to bring up the 2010s. There's this character named Alexander Dugin, who is
Mhm.
a Russian political theorist and philosopher. He's also, by the way, it's worth noting, he's actually an open Satanist. Whether or not he claims it at this point, I don't know, but he has done in the 90s for certain. He's talking about Aleister Crowley's Black Mass. He's, I mean, this guy is out there. He wrote an essay in 97 called The Gnostic, where he says that left hand path, dark magic, is the only spiritual path of any value. He's written about the need to destroy America, to sow all this discord within every American sector, to shatter the thing. He's talked about arming all of America's enemies, including Palestine, with nuclear weapons, using the Russian weapon stocks to do that. This guy is a lunatic, and he's of course been promulgated not just his ideas, but he himself has been interviewed by a large number of these right-wing podcaster demoralization artists, or whatever we want to call them. And so this is why it's important, though, because Dugin's idea, he's written this book people are starting to talk about now called The Foundations of Geopolitics. It's over 900 pages long. If anybody wants to get into it, it's an insanely long book. He's got another book that he wrote more recently. So Foundations of Geopolitics was in the 90s, late 90s, I think. And then I don't remember exactly when, but this other book is called The Fourth Political Theory. And that one came out in 2012 or something like that. So it's much more recent. But what it is this idea that not only is it National Bolshevist, so it's got the elements of communism and fascism mixed together as its kind of model. He wrote an essay in the 90s also called Fascism, Borderless, and Red, in which he called himself a Russian National Socialist specifically and said that's his model. But it has this idea of multipolarity at its core.
Mhm.
The global political order will be multipolar. So multipolar means more than two. Poles of power within the
Yeah.
world. And this is the key piece. This is the object we all need. This is the piece all of our eyes have to go on. Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum talked about the multipolar world 10 years ago. You can go look it up. It's all over his writings from the middle 2010s, when they were on their kind of ascendant curve in 2015, 16, and 18 and 19. He was all about the multipolar world. They always do it in this inevitable kind of mystique where it's like, oh, the multipolar world has already arrived, so
Yeah.
now we have to just adjust to it because it's here. And that's what Tucker Carlson said on his podcast, and you see that from some of these other players that are these podcasters are saying it's already here, it's just reality. But this multipolar world idea is that we're not going to have a US led world order any longer. We're going to have different spheres of influence in the world with different power bases that are roughly equal in their strength. So they don't ever fully specify what these power centers are, but we can make some shrewd guesses. One of them will be the US for certain. Notice I didn't say the West. I said the US,
Yeah.
because that America isolated program is so important to this strategy. And this is what we see with Europe turning on the US, Canada turning on the US increasingly, and maybe even now South Korea is in a bad place with its new president. So America isolated becomes one pole, and it's mighty, so it'll be a pole for a while. China undeniably becomes a pole. Russia sees itself as a pole, and the Islamic world, which isn't one country but like close to 30 countries, becomes a pole. And then you have like South America and Africa, and it's not in Oceania, and it's not clear where they go, right? But certainly Africa is not going to become a pole. It's probably going to become the mine that everybody fights over how they're going to steal their resources. And South America is probably not going to be much better off. Maybe Brazil can get the act together and try to run the continent, but I doubt it. And so what you have is this idea that America's not leading the world order. America's Navy isn't controlling the shipping lanes any longer. What you now have is that, oh, well, Russia runs a huge part of the world. China runs a huge part of the world. The Islamic Caliphate type mindset runs a huge part of the world. And then America has some space, and increasingly diminishing space. So this is part of the theory of, it's called the Century of Asia theory. The idea is to slowly hand off the power base from the United States and the Western hemisphere of world hegemony to the Asian continent.
Mhm.
And there are three kind of powers there that would want to fight over which one of them gets it, that being the Islamic, that being the Russian, and the Chinese. And so these three power bases are going to, it's 3 against 1 against the United States, are going to try to usurp and relocate power for themselves. The CCP, of course, believes it will run that show by 2050. The Russians, I don't know exactly what their ambitions are, because they can't possibly believe they're going to run the show. And of course, the Islamists believe they'll also eventually take everything over because they have the one true religion. And they'll probably have Europe, by the way. I didn't say the West because Europe is probably going to become a raft of Islamic nations under this plan. So what we see are these right-wing podcasters out pushing this idea of either the inevitability or the already arrived state of multipolarity that we now have to adjust to, which is outlined in Alexander Dugin's theory. And like I said, we have, back in the 2010s, you have Alex Jones with the Foundations of Geopolitics on his desk in his shows in 2014, 15, 16, 17. You have Nick Fuentes and Richard Spencer doing shows about the fourth political theory of Alexander Dugin in 2018. You have Steve Bannon meeting with Alexander Dugin after Trump kicks him out of the White House in November of 2018. What that relationship is, I'm not sure. And then, like I said, he's showing up on these shows, whether it's Tucker Carlson, who interviewed him in Russia, whether it's Aaron McIntyre, not his real name, at The Blaze, who's interviewed him once and showcased him for a debate with another, the so-called neo-reactionary lunatic called Nick Land, on his show on The Blaze, or maybe it was on his own personal podcast. I get the two mixed up, so I don't want to misattribute something. But you've got that. And that's ironic, because Glenn Beck has been warning the world about Alexander Dugin since the 90s, since before anybody knew who he was. And here, he doesn't run The Blaze any longer. He runs something called The Torch, but his program that he built is now hosting the guy that he warned about for so long, for so many people. So it's really this interesting phenomenon, and other people have brought him up, and he's being shared. And of course, Dugin's out there like, who are the most important voices in the conservative movement? Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Joe Kent, all of these characters that keep kind of coming up in this same apparent network, pushing these same ideas that are very frequently. Tucker Carlson was recently openly pro, not just Sharia law, but pro China. He's like, it's time for us to share power with China. What? And he doesn't mean, of course, China. He means the CCP. He specifically means a communist government that is rampantly abusing its own people, whether it's the Uyghurs, whether it's Falun Gong, whether it's whoever they feel like persecuting, whether it's people with just low social credit scores. Like, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that we should have a America first voice saying, well, it's just time for us to face reality and put China on equal status with us. Like, President Trump doesn't believe that. This is absolutely insane. But this is the messaging. And I think, like, just to circle back, the point was, we show China, Russia, and Islam looking strong, glorious, vigorous. They have real religion. They have real opportunity. They have real growth. And we show the Western countries, especially America, looking poisoned and bad and drug-addled and falling apart and corrupt. And you create this image in people's minds that they can't love their own country, but they can admire these other countries even though they're evil.
Well, so that brings a very important core question to my reason for interview, which is, a lot of these people are doing it under the banner that they love America more than anything, that they want the best for the country, or at least that's what they say, right? So they're saying that by becoming the example, the quote unquote shining examples. That's how you improve the country, or at least I think that that's where they want this to be heading to, which is let's follow those examples of good, so that America, which we love so much, again quotation marks, can be better, right? What is the like? How did is that a part of this agenda as well, or is that something that they genuinely feel that way, but they were just captured because of that feeling?
I mean, I don't know what their actual motivations are. They
Mhm,
probably are just captured. But the fact of the matter is that the message that they're pushing is that inevitability, or even that it's not even just like a fait accompli in the future. It's
mhm,
like it's like something that's already done, right? Is the idea is like, look, we love America. They conceive of America as a people, not as its constitution. They never say they love these United States or the United States. It's almost always we love America. And then they try to define, well, what is an American? And they have these ideas like heritage American and all these
mhm,
other things to locate it as a people and a place rather than what America actually is, which is this radical nation that's committed to a proposition that we can self-govern and preserve individual liberties and make it work. So anyway, they they attack the actuality of America in the name of this other vision. In
mhm,
the excuse that they give is, look, and this is what they always say, it's just reality.
mhm,
The world has moved on. This 18th century technology, political technology of liberalism or freedom or liberty or common sense or whatever you want to call it doesn't apply anymore. And China's proving it with its advanced technology, and Islam is proving it with its deep spiritual roots, and Russia is proving it with its focus on traditionalism. And what America thinks it has is just deracinated, it's empty, it's crappy. And so it's that they say that they love the people and that they love the land, but we all have to just basically grow up and adapt to this new world that is either arriving or has already arrived. And that's straight Kremlin and Beijing propaganda, because the Kremlin and, well, and also probably Iranian. It's hard to guess for sure where the center of the Islamic messaging is coming from, but it's probably Tehran. A month and a half ago, at least. Not so much. Tehran's a different place now. President Trump says he's going to send them back to the Stone Age where they belong or something now. So who knows? But anyway, you've got Beijing, the Kremlin, and Tehran will use as kind of symbolic locations. Certainly, Moscow and Beijing are clear that they are the ones who benefit from this. The
mhm,
idea of isolating and shrinking America on the world stage, shrinking its economic influence, expanding the Belt and Road Initiative, which runs, by the way, straight through Iran, and both
yep,
of its maritime routes and its primary land route have to run through Iran and Turkey, by the way. So we're going to diminish America and we're going to expand those centers. Guess who benefits from that? They do, and they can sort out the details later. So like I said, it's the goal is to set up these at least three major poles and set them against the United States, to diminish the United States, to make the United States look bad to its own citizens internally and unfaithful and weak to the world around it, so they abandon the United States and leave it isolated. Certainly the partnership with India is up in the air. The I in BRICS is India, but India seems to be making
mhm.
alliances leaning toward, certainly with Israel, and leaning toward the United States as well now. And that's, I think, in our interests. So you have this situation where they are trying to send this message that, look, the world already changed. You just have to deal with it. But it's like what they call, the guys on the internet call this wish casting. They
Mhm.
wish the world was already multipolar. They wish that Russia and China were stronger and more important than they actually are. So they're just telling people that that's the case until people believe it. And of course, not to diminish, I think, the strength of Beijing. Um, Russia has some scary weapons. Beyond that, not a ton of strength going on there. They have economic and energy leverage over Europe, but not a lot of other strength going on there. So this is an interesting game and dynamic. But the game, I think, the game is to get Americans to believe they already lost and to
Mhm.
just give up, rather than to put their flag in the soil and stand strong and say, absolutely not. But the messaging is we already lost, and that's the way they're doing it.
So it's interesting to me because some of the stuff that I'm hearing out from the podcast side is stuff that you would have heard, like the BRICS talk of the multipolar anti-US dollar de-dollarization stuff is, 4 years old, or if the multipolar stuff is from the 2010s. But it seems that they're still running with this, even despite the reality, like you just mentioned, right? Iran is changing after what the US is doing there. Beijing, the CCP's economy and its agenda has been set back by multiple reasons. Russia obviously is having its own issues dealing with Ukraine or Europe, But even then, it makes sense now that you mentioned that it's in their mind if they believe that the multipolar age is already here. It makes them want to still go in that motion, regardless whether the outcome is good or not. So, which makes me wonder if there's reasons why, we all love the recent figure that came out of this whole thing, right? Professor Jiang is the name that we're all familiar with. I want to specifically talk about him because he kind of has this, he like objectively speaking, he's got a lot of views on his channels. A lot of people watch it, whether people believe him or think he's a lunatic. That's a whole different story. But there's a lot of visibility on him. The thing I don't understand is he seems to be able to do the demoralization against the United States, but also at the same time seemingly to maintain this objective sort of, I'm just game theory. I'm just predicting things. How does he fit into this whole, campaign that's happening here?
He's going to write on the blackboard. Okay. I mean, it's just like, so this guy is the most kind of amazing propaganda piece that I've seen in a little while. There's a couple other kind of shining examples, but like just for a moment, you said he has a lot of views. Where does he have a lot of views? Well, one of the places he has a lot of views is YouTube, but YouTube is banned in China, which means he's not popular in China. Well, he might be, but he's not showing his YouTube channel.
I'll tell you right now, I looked him up. There's nothing, that says this guy is a national treasure from China, that kind of thing. There's nothing popular.
I mean, this is like Alexander Dugin. I know a fair smattering of Russians, and I've spoken with them, and they're like, "Do you think they're like Russians are manly? Do you think we like this freak? Like, this is a Western psyop. Like every Russian I know is like, this guy's a Western psyop." And I think this is the same with this so-called quote Professor Jiang or Jiang. I guess I don't know exactly how to say.
Well, he did say he's a fan of Dugin, I think, in one of his.
Yeah, he did. That's right. Yeah. He thinks that Dugin's one of the greatest political theorists. I'm saying that no kidding, these guys are working together, and this is a gigantic theater production we're all watching. It's like a performance. But he comes out and his whole thing is it's the same mystique, right? I'm just describing reality. I'm just making predictions. I'm just telling you how it is. This is what the game theory says. This is what that says. And he says he doesn't come out like he's pushing an ideological program that it's not things should be this way or should be that way. He's just, this is the world. This is how it's good. This is what it is. And it's to create this is absolutely central to this moment of propaganda, is to make people believe that the world already changed out from under them. While you were dealing with COVID, while you were dealing with, Black Lives Matter and all the chaos of the last 5 to 8 years, the world changed. It just changed. And now we're in a different world, and it's multipolar, and there's nothing you can do about it. So the only thing you can do about it is accept it. It's reality. And his role seems to be to strongly give off that vibe. Now, you say, he has a lot of views, and you can look in the numbers and see that he has a lot of views, but we all know that we don't know how many views he actually has, because view counts are extraordinarily easy to artificially inflate. Comments are very easy to artificially generate and create. I actually had a friend who posted a video on YouTube at one point, and within something like 5 or 6 minutes of it going up, obviously it's like a whole podcast, like an hour and a half long. And within 5 or 6 minutes of it going up, it had 1,200 comments saying, "This is garbage, this is trash," or whatever. And then suddenly about 10 minutes later, all those comments disappeared after YouTube figured out that they were bot spam. And so it's very definitely the case that it's easy to manipulate those numbers, but we can take at face value that he does have a lot of views, that Tucker Carlson had him on his show and tried to make him more popular. But the goal is that the world changed without you, and you just have to adapt. And I think that carries with it, this sense of inevitability, but also the sense of opportunity. This is where all the opportunity is going to be. This is where the growth is going to be. And then a sense of fear. If I don't catch the wave, then I'm going to get left behind, and I'm not going to understand the world I actually live in. So I better step into this. What is multipolar theory? What is all this? And so I think that's his role, is to create more of that sense. But this guy is as blatantly a propaganda piece as I could possibly have imagined. He's in fact such a caricature in most ways that I can tell that I think I can't watch him because I think it's too funny. Like, I can't actually try to understand what he's saying because it's just kind of too amusing that people fall for this. But
I'll tell you what my viewers told me when I did some videos on him. One of the there's two main sort of theories. One is you get attracted to his videos because of his caricature and the way that he presents, and then you listen for 5 minutes and you figure out that he's actually telling, he's spewing crap basically. But the other side is saying that, and again, this could be the bot stuff that you're talking about, but they're saying that, hey, maybe he's not right all the time, but he gets people thinking. He's throwing out the alternative idea out there. We shouldn't be allowing just one unique idea. We should be allowing multiple, right? So that kind of, which I actually thought it'd be interesting to ask you this. It sounds okay, right? Like, yeah, we can have all sorts of ideas. Like, why not? But it seems to me like that's not exactly what they want.
No, it's not. What you're actually seeing is I think of an onion. This is like the propaganda piece onion, right? So some propaganda narrative or a propagandist, a character like Professor Jiang or somebody comes out, and at first it's like, oh wow, this guy's great, and that's like the paper skin on the outside of the onion. You peel it off and you get in, and you're like, I don't know about this thing, and then it's like, oh well, it's just free speech, and that's a layer of the onion. It's he's just putting out ideas for people to think about. That's a layer of the onion. Well, some of the stuff he says is true, but not all of it. That's a layer of the onion. And when you can actually just keep peeling down this set of like onion like excuses for why people should pay attention to the guy, you get to the middle and there's nothing there. Just absolutely nothing. The last layer, you open it up and you're done. The onion's gone. And so the game there, the reason for this onion peeling game with narrative warfare, which of course is one of the Chinese, by the way, the CCP has its 3 warfares policy, the PLA does. So people who are not familiar, the People's Liberation Army has its 3 warfares campaign, which is what? Political warfare, lawfare, and public opinion or media warfare. This guy's in the public opinion and media warfare. The goal is to keep the thing going as long as you can, because when it's going, they're extracting value out of it. They're moving. They're advancing their political agenda. They know eventually the excuses are going to peel away and there's going to be nothing there and the guy is not going to be a figure anymore. But the goal is, can we get 6 months out of him? Can we get a year out of him? Can we continue to advance our narrative for the next 3, 6, 9, 12, 18, 24 months until finally he craps out and nobody listens to him anymore? And so these excuses are designed to slow down the process of people discarding. Oh, well, you just got to hear him out. Oh, he's an interesting figure. Yeah, he's fake, but I can't stop watching because it's hilarious, or whatever. It's just to keep eyeballs on it, to keep him a relevant figure so that he can deliver his payload. Think of it like, as in a kinetic military operation, an airstrike. Think of it like a bomber that has a whole lot of bombs in it. So like Professor Jiang is the bomber, and he's got a bunch of bombs, and every time he makes a video, he's dropping a bomb. But if nobody watches the videos, the bombs, it's like them not hitting anything, right? And so they have to keep him interesting so that the bombs hit. So maybe only 5% of his audience falls for it. Maybe only 2%, maybe 10%, maybe 20%, who knows? But they need to keep people watching, which means he can still continue to hit targets with those bombs. And eventually it all gets kind of unmasked and it doesn't work anymore. But the game is to keep it as long as possible. So you always see this. I mean, this was the joke with all of the woke stuff for the last like 10 years. It was, that's not happening. Okay, it's happening, but it's rare. Okay, it's not rare, but it's good, and it was just this layer by layer by layer process. You could watch every narrative run through, and it's like peeling away the onion. And the goal that nobody's really fully grasped of that game is just to keep it running as long as possible, to give it plausible deniability or interest or whatever for as long as possible, because the narrative or the figure is able to drop and deliver payloads of propaganda or media warfare, public opinion warfare, so long as he's not fully discredited. And so these excuses are designed to do that.
So just to cap off the interview, I thought about, because this isn't the first time people have fallen for this stuff. Like I was thinking one shining example that I think young people especially have been dealt with, which is the threat of TikTok. Because a few years ago, if you told people that TikTok was harvesting your data and you're going to be, the Chinese government's going to have your everything, people would say that, oh, that's okay, I'm just a guy. And then now, you have people that are falling for certain type of things because they catered their attack based on what they know about you. But with other stuff too, and this applies, I think, to both sides, whether you're left or right or center or which, people are susceptible to this stuff. What is I guess what I want to understand is, why are people so easily, how do they fall for this stuff so easily? Is it a lack of understanding of this, or they don't know where to attribute it, or they just simply think that this is what's real out there, or that fits their worldview?
Well, I think it's actually that these manipulations all exploit certain vulnerabilities, and obviously there's lots of them. People don't know what's going on, so they feel uncertain. They don't know who to trust, so everything seems, you can't turn to the CDC, you can't turn to CNN. Who do you turn to? So you have these different vulnerable spots. And like you said, the algorithms on things like TikTok and so on will harvest your data to find out specifically, not just, politically, but also, or sociologically, but also psychologically, where your vulnerabilities are. And then your algorithm could be tailored to feed you the specific propaganda that fits into that. So if you don't know what's going on in the world and you feel like everything's crazy and uncertain, and then somebody like Professor Jiang is stuck in front of you and you watch a couple of his like clips or whatever, it's, a minute and 20 seconds, you watch it and you're like, I don't know if that's right, but it really seems to make sense of some stuff. it fills in that vulnerability. Like, for example, a lot of the conspiracy theory stuff, it's been pretty well known that, yeah, okay, so we're pretty sure that some conspiracies are true. I've alleged, in fact, that the woke right is actually operating by conspiracy. Dugin being a figure, Jiang being a figure, some of these podcasters being, nodes in that network. So there are conspiracies, but the problem is like, psychologically, what conspiracy theories, especially the really outlandish ones, do,
Mhm.
like blaming Jews for everything or blaming Israel for everything. What they do is you have a sense of a world that's out of your control, and all of a
Mm.
sudden you have a single explanation that kind of ties everything together, which allays that feeling. You no longer feel as afraid or as anxious or as stressed because you at least have an explanation for the problem, and somebody could do something about that. Somebody could deal with, if we could just cut off our relationship with Israel, or if we could just find the pilots that are flying the chemtrails and hold them responsible. There's this sense that there's a resolution to a feeling of anxiety and fear and vulnerability. And this is where the TikTok element gets so scary, because you have a hostile foreign government that has very sophisticated tools for public opinion warfare, developed over decades now and employed over decades, knowing that that's how you have to deal with a stronger military opponent like the United States, that are good at harvesting that data and then feeding back to you where you're weak. And the goal isn't to just take advantage of you or make you feel even weaker where you're weak, which a lot of people, some of it is. We talked about that. You make people feel they see problems in their country, you make them feel worse about the problems in their country. But also to take advantage of those anxieties and to offer them the guy who has the explanation, who's going to lead them out of the wilderness. There's a lot of kind of lead me out of the wilderness thinking. And so people are very susceptible to it. I'll just point out also, that if you read this book, it's called Propaganda by Jacques Ellul. He's a leftist, so it's not necessarily the best book in the world about propaganda. That's Ellul, Jacques Ellul. It's a French guy, but he actually talks about this character who's the most susceptible to propaganda that he calls current events man. So
Mm.
current events man is the guy, we would call him a pundit if he was doing the show, but as a consumer of news media, it's the guy who's watching like every show, every podcast. He's just trying to
Yeah.
stay in touch. He's trying to keep up with everything. So much is happening that nobody can keep up with what's going on. And so that creates its own sense of anxiety and its own sense of lack of understanding. And so what you have are these current event providers who are the pundits, who are these news commentator type people who just endlessly tell you what the news means. They don't tell you the news, they tell you what the news means. And they all have a slant. They all have not just a slant, an agenda. It's not that they're biased and everybody has a bias and they stand for a political side. No, a lot of these guys are propagandists. They have an agenda. So they're telling you what the news means to create a coherent sense of a narrative so that you make sense of the world the way they want you to make sense of it. And that is the kind of thing that characters like Professor Jiang and even Dugin, although Dugin's really creepy, but Tucker Carlson and so on provide to people. They're the trusted voice who's providing a sense of narrative to exploit their vulnerabilities, to take them on a line. And so the current events man, the person who's, how the internet saying is go touch grass, get outside, turn
Yeah.
off your feed, stop doom scrolling. Those phrases are all referring to stop being current events man. You don't have to keep up with every single thing that's happening. The internet is still going to be crazy. If you take 3 days off and come back, it's still going to be absolutely bonkers when you come back. And you can protect your own ability to think clearly and critically by stepping away from it more. Because current events man, according to Jacques Ellul, is the most susceptible. He's so ensconced in this, 10 things a day that he can't get the broader view. He can't step back. He can't really understand the world that he's in because he's just being misled by all of these opinion pieces and all of these commentators and so on. So I think this is why vulnerabilities, the inability, like the news moves so fast now, you can't keep up with it, which is its own set of stresses. And the fact that propaganda is often tailored to not just elicit emotional reactions like feeling terrible about your country or inspired about a foreign power or afraid of a Lego video from Tehran, but also to assuage your anxieties, to fit into those places where you're the least comfortable, and to give you a message, a narrative, and a sense of vision and purpose that ultimately is misleading you. So lots of factors, I think, at the moment. The internet is or social media, I should say, not just the internet, is probably the most fruitful propaganda playground that has ever been devised by man. It's a million times more effective than leaflets or brochures or even newspapers at getting people into what they call rabbit holes and every other thing. So I think that's why people are so susceptible. It's just human psychology, and the bad guys, if you will, are very happy to and very good at exploiting it.
And before I go, because you mentioned a lot of these books today, do you want to tell us? I know you personally have also written books too. What are some of the books you recommend, whether from yourself or from others that you think? Because our viewership is quite young, I would say the 25 to 35 range mostly. Something that people would be or should be reading.
Well, I mean, I always have a hard time with this question because there's so many different subjects, and the primary thing that I
Yeah.
actually read are original sources. I do
Mm,
recommend, though, that people do read on propaganda. I think it's very important to understand. Like, take the time. So, Jacques Ellul's book Propaganda, Edward Bernays' book Propaganda. They're both titled Propaganda. Um, you could look at if you. I mean, it's harder to read, but if you look at Lenin's book, 1902 book, Vladimir Lenin's book, not John Lennon, Vladimir Lenin's
mm,
book, What Is to Be Done from 1902, where he talks about the use of propaganda. If you go find a copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's, manifesto on the internet, they're there. They're easy to find. Go look one up and read his chapter on war propaganda, and like you can start to see the things that are being done to you. Like some of these people have talked about it. So with regard to propaganda, read about the people who are considered the masters of propaganda. I always recommend people, especially people who have any interest in China, and kind of understanding the totalitarian mindset. This is a difficult book. It's a very long book. It is called Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, a study of brainwashing in China, by Robert J. Lifton, which was published in the 1960s. What he was doing was, in the 1950s, Mao Zedong was trying to brainwash people in China and the beginning of the CCP rule over China. And they'd go to their prison or whatever, they go through a school or whatever it was, as prisons and schools primarily. And then the people who couldn't be brainwashed, they'd kick them out. They didn't lock the country down yet until the late 1950s. So in the early 1950s, they were kicking them out. And so they'd try to brainwash you. It didn't work. They'd put you on a boat and ship you to Hong Kong. And so Robert J. Lifton was in Hong Kong, and he started running into these people. He's a psychiatrist, and he started running into these people and talking to them. He's like, this is the most fascinating thing ever. He sticks around in Hong Kong an extra year and a half and interviews dozens of these people and writes a book about brainwashing. And it's an incredibly important book historically in terms of what the Maoists were doing to the Chinese population and to foreigners that were there. A lot of the characters are foreigners who got ejected after they went to prison for 3 or 5 years, but also through the schools for the native Chinese citizens. And so it's an incredible read to understand the psychology. He says of the title is The Psychology of Totalism, right? Thought
mm,
reform, which Mao called ideological remolding.
yeah.
The thought reform and the psychology of totalism. So the totalitarian mindset. And he talks about how they control the environment that you're in. There's a mystical sacred science that everybody has to defer to. It's just very interesting to understand the totalitarian cult circumstance, which we're actually being inundated with. We're being hit by this all the time. So I recommend so many people I recommend read this book, but it's difficult. I mean, for a 25 to 30-year-old, it's going to be a challenge. It's a bite to take and chew, but it's about 550 pages too, and it's kind of repetitive. You're reading one horrible story after another of prisoners, and then his thoughts kind of to concretize it and put together a psychological theory. But I recommend it very strongly to people. Even though Robert Lifton is kind of gone, like he's like UN globalist nut job now in his old age, but he really had a clear eye into what the CCP was doing in its earliest years, and that tells the world a lot about the cult of a totalitarian nation.
Yeah, well, I think that there's so many names like Jeffrey Sachs and all these people we could talk about for a whole other thing on why they're going to China, all that. But thank you very much, James Lindsay. Pleasure to speak with you today. Hope to have you back on for more topics on what's happening around the world.
Yeah, well, thanks, David. That was great.